straightforward pricing, and inventory arriving daily. There's no reason to start anywhere else than the Motor Mile. Volume selling means volume pricing, and we've got the volume. The used car superstore is your one stop for most makes and models. Cars, trucks, vans, SUVs, many have miles in the teens, remaining factory warranties, and some are even local one-owner vehicles. Shop over 900 used vehicles in stock now, more than any other dealer in the area. Sheeler owns the finance company, so getting approved for credit is easy on the Motor Mile. With financing options for every budget, you're a valued customer and not just a number on the Motor Mile. The used car superstore on the Sheeler Motor Mile, your premier family-owned car dealer serving Southwest Virginia and surrounding areas for 50 years. I-81 exit 118C in Christiansburg. Call 866-SHEELER1. Always open at Sheeler.com. And we're excited to welcome Honda and Hyundai to the Motor Mile family. Why start anywhere else?
Sandstone architecture, melodic music, wonders of the world. They're staples of Egyptian and Mediterranean culture. But you don't have to travel thousands of miles to experience it. Just drive to downtown Cairo. Located in the Grays Mill Center in Forest, downtown Cairo brings you food from the entire Mediterranean, blended with the best Egyptian recipes. This means fresh ingredients cooked on a charcoal grill, staples like $5 heroes, and build your own Mediterranean bowl. Experience the taste of Egyptian and Mediterranean world in your own backyard. Downtown Cairo, Grays Mill Shopping Center in Forest.
You're stepping into the fast lane on the VTRN Sports app. 93.3 FM and 1320 AM Lynchburg, or by asking Alexa or Google Home, open VTRN Sports Lynchburg. Now, take the fast lane through the topics that matter across the Commonwealth. This is the Fast Lane with Ed Lane.
Trey, do you go fishing?
I have in the past.
If you went fishing, you would go to Africa and go in denial.
Ha!
Yes, because Trey believes this occurred last night on the VTRN Sports app. In fact, he did so much as to discuss it on the morning warm-up with Ty Tracy today around 8 a.m. Well, 7 to 8 a.m. But this is the part where you have to appreciate what Jaden Daniels is doing with the Washington Commanders, unless you're Trey fishing over in the Middle East.
3rd and goal from the 10. 7 to go, second quarter. McLaurin wide to the right with McCaffrey. 2 to the left, including Brown, De'Ami Brown. Eckler, the tailback, to the right out of the shotgun of the slender Daniels. That tall, slender frame in the pocket, taking the snap. He's back in 5 steps. Daniels steps up, whistles it right down the middle, and a wide open touchdown for De'Ami Brown. Nobody in the zip code, and Washington takes the lead 6-3 at 9:26, but there is a marker down on the play.
Beyond that, the important thing is that drive was really good. We had a conversion on 4th down, several 3rd down conversions. They grinded it out. There wasn't any big 50-yard gain. How many snaps was that drive?
17 plays.
Wow. 92 yards in 9 minutes plus.
17 plays, 92 yards, 9 minutes plus. And this is an offense that features one of already the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Not the best, but one of the best. He's playing that
one who I will say he has played like one of the best. I'm not going to put him in that category because it's one season. You and I, okay, if we go back a little bit in time, there is a time in our lives, not recently, where we could say the same thing about Carson Wentz, say the same thing about Deshaun Watson, say the same thing. Like, this is the reason I saw someone put Jaden Daniels in the Lamar, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes conversation. And I said no in my head because he doesn't belong there, not to take away from Jaden Daniels, is because we've seen it consistently. And it's been one season. And not too long ago, there was this rookie quarterback having the best rookie season we've ever seen. And if he didn't play in the AFC South, he probably would have made the playoffs this year. And luckily for Houston Texans, they are in the divisional round too. So congratulations.
But here's the thing. And this is where Trey has gone fishing over into the Middle East in denial. The thing about this is Jaden Daniels, first of all, biggest picture. He inherited a much worse situation than any of those other guys, than really anybody's ever inherited.
Drake Mace was pretty bad.
Well, but Washington had to rid themselves of the stench of Daniel Snyder, which, by the way, I think it was you or Ty on the Morning Jam who said that may be the best first buster of all time.
I tweeted it last night too. I said I think getting rid of Dan Snyder created like the greatest luck charm in the history of sports, because here's and I'm going to use this stat later again, but this is an incredible stat, and it shows like you have to give them credit, but I also think like it shows that Washington is basically having, like, if you want to run 100 simulations of their season, like the peak of it in terms of where their roster is and what they did, and having a rookie quarterback who's also like the same age as me, the same age as Joe Burrow. So is he really a rookie? But they've had 6 game-winning scores in the final 10 seconds or overtime, tied with the 2021 Raiders for the most since 1970. And that Raiders team, obviously, we saw what happened after. I think that was the Rich Bisaccia.
That was the Rich Bisaccia. They should have actually kept him as their head coach. Team.
Raiders. So good news for Commanders fans. You will not have a bad, you have your head coach in place, unlike those Raiders.
Well, there's a lot of good news for the Commanders. Truthfully, this weekend, a lot of it may be exploited when they go to Detroit, because
a lot it will.
Mark Dominic, who is, of course, on the show that follows yours, the second and third hours of the VSiN by the book show that they have.
8 to 10.
8 to 10. Mark Dominic was pointing this out numerous times today that, he expects that line, which was at 8.5, to go up to closer to 10 by the time that game gets going. Here's the thing. For Washington, I do tend to believe here's some merit to this thought. If it's a shootout and close, I still value Washington because Jaden Daniels has the charisma and the knowledge to win games. But I do think the biggest challenge for Washington is this weekend, I think you finally encounter a coaching staff that really does understand that you've got to just bury this team so there is no hope, and take advantage of the fact that you have a much more talented roster than the Washington Commanders, which goes to the fact that drive that they discussed, the scoring drive that we played the clip from the Westwood One broadcast. And of course, you can hear every postseason game for the NFL playoffs on your home for the NFL, VTR and Sports app, and 93.3 FM, including tonight's game in Arizona between the Vikings and the Rams, moved from the LA Wildfires.
Winner plays Philadelphia.
Winner goes to Philadelphia next Sunday.
Saturday. No, you're right. Sunday, because it's the Monday night game.
Sunday afternoon. So, 16 plays, 92 yards, 9 minutes off the clock. Jaden Daniels orchestrated 95-plus yard drives against other teams as well, against Philadelphia in the clutch late. Like, this is not an anomaly for this guy. He continues to do it, and he's doing it with, I would say, and this is where this weekend it may be exploited, but this is why the Jaden Daniels thing is real. He's doing it with a meh defense. Sorry, Washington fans, I'm not all in on Marshawn Lattimore. They've largely underachieved.
He got cooked last night. Let's be real.
I mean, let's keep it real.
The hyped up battle was a one-sided beating by Mike Evans.
Yeah, and it's not the only time. A.J. Brown drew like 4 pass interference penalties against them in the matchup.
And he's been hurt to his, to
put context to it.
Yeah.
But the defense isn't great. The offensive line. This is not the Lions or Eagles with dominant offensive lines, 2 of the best in the NFL. This is not that. Terry McLaurin is an all-pro-ish caliber wide receiver. I don't quite put him in the category of a Tyreek Hill or a Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase.
He might be the 4th best receiver in his own division. I mean, it's between him and Devontae.
Yeah,
I would argue, because I think AJ and CD are clearly better than him.
I mean, I would agree with that. But
those are 2 of the probably 4 best receivers in the NFL.
I would agree with that. But look
and
at
that's
all the
not
weapons
to take away from Terry.
Look at all the weapons the Commanders don't have, and what Jaden Daniels is doing with this offense, in spite of a meh offensive line, in spite of one good receiver, and then a bunch of guys that, let's be honest, can be upgraded. A running back who his story is great as far as coming back from the gunshot wound, but he is nowhere close to being an impactful running back the way others are.
But I will say this, and I thought about this, is that they do have good, savvy veterans that fit the scheme, because it's a lot, and it's going to be interesting to see how this offense develops, and it's starting to develop a little bit, but it's a lot of the RPO game. It's a lot of quick screens. It's a lot of in breakers and a lot of short passes to the swing passes. And you got a guy like Austin Eckler, who has led the league in touchdowns. You have a guy like Zach Ertz, who is I don't want to call him a Hall of Fame caliber tight end, but an elite caliber tight end when he was in his prime. And I'm not saying neither player's in their prime, but they're still good enough to make plays in games.
So I will interject. I think one of the key points you bring that has helped Jaden Daniels and the Commanders is for the lack of talent that they have. And that's my point.
It was
about
smart
Jaden
roster
Daniels.
moving.
It very much so. They brought in a bunch of guys that Dan Quinn knew as far as character guys from Dallas that were glue guys. And we saw what that did and won. But part of it is those guys played a big role in Dallas's success. And now they left Dallas. And let's be real here, even with the news today of Mike McCarthy getting let go because, I mean, again, the GM is never at fault in Dallas. He's never going to get fired.
Well, he owns the team.
That's right. But because of that, Dallas lost a lot of those glue guys, and they slid back because they have stars and then nonsense after that.
And they had injuries.
Yeah, the Commanders are a bunch of mediocre guys, but they are viable glue guys who you know what you're going to get out of them, and you can at least game plan around them in terms of they're going to play hard. Cliche city here coming. They're going to play assignment football on defense and offense. They're going to do what you expect out of them, and that may not be enough against the best teams. But if you get the game close, you've proven in the playoffs and in deep postseason and in deep regular season games late in the season that you have a quarterback that can orchestrate those.
I also think they got the best matchup for them possible in terms of a defense in Tampa that has a lot of older players on it. Like, despite the fact that Levante David at his age made a ridiculous play of pushing Jaden Daniels out of bounds and meeting him for speed, the Todd Bowles defense. I've done that already twice today.
On the morning warm-up,
I know. Well, I talked to Tom a lot, and the first time I met Tom, I called him Todd. So it just all ties together.
And we're getting closer to the start of the NASCAR season.
We are. So I think it was a good matchup for I think it's fair to say Tampa is probably the worst team of the playoff teams in the NFC.
I would say so. It's them and the Rams, but I give the Rams a major quarterback and coaching advantage.
And and a skill. I would if they would never have been the 5 seed, but let's say the Rams got the 3 or it'd be the 3-6. The Rams were the 3 seed. I wouldn't be shocked if the I think the Rams probably could have done more with exploiting that Washington defense, and maybe with Jared Verse being a little bit more athletic from an edge point of view than anything that Tampa's gotten, that they could have hurt Jaden. They were lucky they didn't have to play Philadelphia. I think that would have been probably the worst of the teams they had to face of the 3 teams. One note about Detroit, and this was what I was thinking, and I talked about the 4th down aggression by Dan Quinn, what it ultimately worked out. Happened to have some fumble luck with it. Unlike Bowles, who I think was super conservative in that game. And I think ultimately that might have cost them, is that their lack of aggression basically did not allowed Washington to maintain ball control. And that kind of got Washington in the game because defensively they weren't really stomping Tampa. It's just Washington controlled the ball so much that kept Tampa off the field. I think Baker was averaging 10 yards attempt or something crazy like that. But when you play the Lions, the one thing I know for sure is that Dan Campbell is going to be balls to the wall aggressive. And it's I joked this morning, I said, it's like Andre the Giant versus Hulk Hogan, the immovable object versus the irresistible force. And this is in terms of the 4th grade, because Washington has the best 4th down EPA ever. And is that sustainable? No, it's just not, because it's a one play situation. But when they play Detroit, they're going to have to be at their absolute max on 4th down in terms of aggression. We have all week to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into the game plan going forward. But if it's close, I do favor Washington because of the quarterback. But I think there's an easy path to where Detroit knows that they've got enough offensive playmakers and they're willing to play that grinded out game, much like Washington is. They're as multifaceted as it gets. By the way, one total side note. As an Eagles fan, if the Eagles don't win the championship, I'd either want the Lions or the Bills. I want a
Lions. So if you follow, I picked Chiefs Lions as my Super Bowl, which I think would be a fun Super Bowl. But like from a fan point, like a NFL fan point of view, outside of Philadelphia playing in it, I think the most fun Super Bowl possible is Bills Lions.
Oh God, yes, please.
And
yes, please.
and speaking of fans, I think the last time Jaden Daniels entered an environment like he is on Sunday was maybe the Thursday night game against Philadelphia, where he clearly did not play his best game of the season. But I'd argue this will be the most, and that since it was a Thursday night game in Philadelphia, not a playoff game in Philadelphia, this is a playoff game in Detroit. And I think
these people have been starved.
And this is probably their best season ever.
Trey, I got a nickname. I got a nickname for the preview articles for our folks in the print publication.
Go ahead.
Seawalk and take this. Daniels in the Lion's Den.
You know what? That might work. It might mean that like this might be his, since his SEC days, like type of environment he's entering in, and it's gonna be interesting to see how it shakes out because it's an interesting matchup. I favor Detroit. I think the line is appropriate at around 10 points because the line.
It's 8. Is it all the way to 10? It was 8.5. Early,
maybe it's 8.
Dominic was the one on the morning
between more than one
1-1.
touchdown. I think it's fair to be more than one touchdown. Let's just put it that way.
I mean, I easily see a scenario again. If it's close.
It's 9.5 on the network that features Gojo and Golic that will feature the greatest basketball player we've ever seen in LeBron James at 6 o'clock.
Trey, while I'm not conceding that, I will give you a lot of props on the morning warm-up today because you're the one who said that basketball player at least is appearing on our network on one of our shows.
Haven't seen Michael Jordan. Maybe your boy Lombardi, now that he's got all this Jordan gear, can get you a connection to MJ.
I would be excited to have that happen. I'm not holding my breath that it will. Meanwhile, hold your breath because when we return in the fast lane, we will get to some observations building on what Trey mentioned. The weekend in college basketball, Tech, UVA, and Liberty. Then the experts will go into greater depth on them in covering the Commonwealth around 5:35 today. This is the Fast Lane, VTR and Sports app and 93.3 FM.
Everyone wants to save money on their next car purchase, right? Well, listen up because I have a way for you to save thousands. Right now, Volkswagen is offering 0% for up to 60 months on a new VW Tiguan with approved credit. Do you realize when you compare a 6.9% rate on $30,000, it can save you $5,730? Now, that's an opportunity you don't want to miss. Come by Terry Volkswagen today before this deal is gone and take a spin in this amazing SUV. Terry Volkswagen. You'll love our cars.
At Three Roads Brewing, we're a fabric of historic downtown Lynchburg. We brew community. Each month, Three Roads Brewing partners with a local nonprofit. Enjoy weekly events like trivia, bingo, and live music while sipping from one of our 20 taps. All to join Three Roads Brewing and supporting Lynchburg. Experience the charm of the Dan River District at Ballad Brewing. Join us for weekly events from our 5,000 square foot tap room. Fun like trivia, bingo, and live music plus 20 taps. And visit Ballad Brewing on Facebook for updated info like special events.
Allstate agent Donovan Howell is now serving Lynchburg. He lives and works here just like you. And with all kinds of local insurance advice, Donovan is someone you can count on to help you protect all that's good in your life. Donovan makes it easy to save on the quality protection you need, and I'll even help you do the switching and the paperwork for you.
Call or come by the Donovan Howell Allstate office in Windhurst today.
Real soul food. You feel the warmth from the first bite to the last? That feeling comes to life at the Yard on 5th Street. Staples like fried catfish sandwich and platter, smoked wings, pulled pork, and Philly brisket sandwich, just like a cheesesteak, except with smoked briskets. Come feel the warmth in every bit of Lynchburg's best soul food. The Yard on 5th Street in downtown Lynchburg.
Hi, I'm Zach Mackey, the voice of Virginia Tech men's basketball. Catch the Fast Lane with Ed Lane and Trey Lyle weekdays 5 to 6 p.m. on VTRN Sports 93.3 FM and the VTRN Sports app.
Hey, this is Virginia Tech analyst and former Hokies tight end Mike Burnham. You're listening to the Fast Lane with Ed Lane and Trey Lyle. Join the chat at Trey Lyle VT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram.
If you want to call it breaking news, we'll go with that. But we begin the Fast Five at 5-ish with some breaking and rather reassuring news for those of us that were going WTF when watching that second college football playoff game on Friday night.
It's time for Fast Five at 5-ish. 5-ish minutes on 5 relevant topics done around 5 p.m.-ish. Ish, because our counting skills are kind of ish. Let's start with number 5.
SEC officiating crew will be working the college football national title game next Monday night between Ohio State and Notre Dame. The WTF is for what the fill in the blank was going on in that Cotton Bowl matchup between Texas and Ohio State. When the officiating crew that worked that matchup, Trey said this very well in the morning warm-up today, 7 to 8 a.m. weekdays, VTR and Sports app. But that officiating crew is the one that had been twice reprimanded for the ACC. The Duke-Miami fiasco when Miami won on like a gazillion laterals in a year where why would you really want that? Because Miami was mediocre, but they won it anyway. And then obviously the infamous Virginia Tech-Miami, no explanation, no clarity, no complete confusion and chaos call earlier this year. That's the officiating crew that somehow was allowed to officiate a college football playoff game, much less a semifinal matchup.
No,
That's
and
the
that
best
was
the ACC has?
And that was their second playoff game because I believe Pat McAfee mentioned it. They did the game in South Bend between Indiana and Notre Dame. And I'm just sitting there like from an optics point of view, and it probably was an all-star.
It's so bushy.
From an optics point, like you just can't have that ref there because there's clear like any review of consequence would have been nuts. And luckily it seemed to be, there was no real, I don't think, controversial calls in that game, maybe one or two, but nothing as bad as previous.
Good one from our guy, OJ Hodgkinson on Twitter, Oliver Hodgkinson of College Football Network. Found a way to get an SEC team in the title game. Haha, touche.
I said that joke too without even looking at it.
Number 4.
Women's college basketball over the weekend, which if you're a Virginia Tech or Virginia fan, may be better than the men's. Women's won their 3rd consecutive game. Big fourth quarter, they were trailing by 1 entering the fourth quarter against Wake Forest, but they pulled away for a 7-point victory. Looks like Megan Duffy's team is finding their squad. Limited upside. I don't think this is an ACC championship team, given how great Notre Dame is and some of the other teams in the ACC at the top.
Well, Notre Dame does have maybe the best player in the country.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it.
Hannah Hidalgo.
But it looks like there's some optimism. And for Virginia, they lost to Duke, who, again, they had the lead and Duke had a big fourth quarter, and Duke wins by 5. This is a really good Duke team for Kara Lawson, and they're ranked. But kind of wonder if you're at that point of when Virginia will get over the hump. Now, they look like they're playing more jointed and playing together than they were when Coach Mox was really getting on their case earlier this year. But there will be opportunities for Virginia women's basketball to get over the hump, but they need a number of those, given that this is a team right now just a couple of games above 500 and trying to boost their resume. Now, when you think of resumes in women's college basketball, it's a lot easier to do that in the ACC on the women's side, where there are a bunch of good teams and ranked teams, than on the men's side, where it's kind of trash.
Number 3.
Speaking of bad men's basketball, are we at the point now, after Virginia's trip out west, they got housed by Stanford after getting blasted and then getting blasted by Cal? Are we at the point now where we just know, they got beat by Cal and then housed by Stanford on Saturday? I should know because one of our listeners, Thomas, was there and actually is weighed in, and we'll get to that tomorrow in the Fast Lane. Are we at the point now where we just know what they are with Ron Sanchez about this team and this program? And I don't know how you get people excited over the remainder of this season. And I don't know whether it's really worth beating Ron Sanchez up, other than saying maybe the mistake was for Tony Bennett to be the one that's who the Bennetts wanted to succeed him. Look, God bless Tony Bennett, and he's done more for Virginia basketball. And at some point, the court at John Paul Jones Arena should be named for him, although Tony, knowing how humble he is probably going to try to put the kibosh on that. But that was not the right guy. I don't think there's anything about Ron Sanchez. It's they play hard early. Other teams respect Virginia, but when it comes time to make adjustments, other teams have more ability to do that, and Virginia looks very limited, which is why they get everyone's best shot because of the name on the front of the jersey, and people believe enough in what was assembled, but ultimately it's just not enough there, and it's why close early, but as the game progresses, particularly toward halftime and especially in the second half, it looks like Virginia is just totally outmatched.
Yeah, I mean, I've stated a couple times, I've stated here, stated on the morning warm-up, Ron Sanchez got an unwinnable hand. It's just, can you show me improvement throughout the season? And we're going to get to the next team in a second. Mike Young got the same thing, but has shown improvement, i.e., especially this past Saturday.
And we will get to that in
number 2.
Mike Young for Virginia Tech. Okay, watching the game, you're going, how in the world is this team blowing a 22-point lead?
13 turnovers.
But 13 turnovers are a part of that. Again, we've documented this. It's in it by what they have left. An inexperienced backcourt. Some athleticism, but very inexperienced. I think Mike Young, you said it so well, Trey. He's making chicken salad out of you-know-what. Like, he is squeezing whatever can be had out of this turnip of a roster right now. It's not great. They're going to get blitzed. Well, a lot of people are going to get blitzed by Duke. So let's ignore that. That's the best team in the ACC and maybe in the country, given how great Cooper Flagg is starting to look.
Yeah, they also have the best player in the country.
Yeah, I mean, they look very, very legit to win a national title this year with Cooper Flagg. He's the exception as far as one and dones that can carry you there, and he sure looks like it. But they look like the team that, if I'm a Virginia Tech fan, I don't expect them to make the NIT. I don't expect them to be a winning team. But if I'm a Tech fan, given how young they are, no pun intended, but how young this roster is in terms of players, if they can at least scrap and claw their way to a respectable finish, I think there's worth being a bit prideful in that. If you are Virginia Tech as a fan, because there's, to go as our friend Young Jeezy would say, and to his ever-loving credit, Mike Young, who's a brilliant offensive mastermind, is doing the best he can with that, living through some serious, legit growing pains.
Number 1.
Liberty basketball. They lost at Louisiana Tech. Here's where I will give them, they're not going to go undefeated in Conference USA play. Right now, they're 2-2. They lost to Western Kentucky, won against Middle Tennessee last Saturday. Then this weekend, they beat Sam Houston and lost at Louisiana Tech. For Liberty, the good is you found a guy in Talon Peter who is capable of going off on scoring. He has been scorching hot since Conference USA play began, including a 30-plus point performance Saturday in that loss. The challenge for Liberty is there's just no real depth. And to Richie McKay's credit, they're toying with whatever lineup they can possibly put together and throw out there. But there's just not enough right now in terms of depth for Liberty. And to Richie McKay's credit, he's looking for different guys, whether it's a Kai Yu or a Bryson Spell or a Curtis Blair or a Gabriel McKay. But truthfully, it looks like from the outside looking in, those are players that are more consuming minutes and spelling the sixth group of players, which went down to 5 when Colin Porter went out with what I thought was a real gruesome looking injury. I went back and watched the replay of it a couple times, and ultimately he came back into the game. That's the biggest sigh of relief for Liberty, even though they lost the game this past Saturday. Meanwhile, more on those teams. Tech, Liberty, UVA. And to kick it off, probably, the JMU Dukes with Shane Metlin. And at the back half, our girl, Seawall. Yes, she'll get the song Serenade.
Those haters can't stand us. Left hand up. Who are we? The Commanders.
When we connect with her at the end of covering the Commonwealth, which comes your way next here in the Fast Lane. From interest rates to everyone's personal credit history and background, everybody's in a different spot. At Feller Chevrolet, they understand that. It's why Greg Walker spoke with us and shared how Feller Chevrolet can work with you.
Well, we have multiple lenders, so everybody's different in personality and in their credit equity of what they put into a vehicle. So the different lenders have different areas that they like to go after, and we know which ones to use for the different individuals to get them the best payments possible, terms that they need. As far as interest rates, everybody is saying, "Oh my goodness, they're getting so high." But if you look historically, we're really right in a rate area that traditionally for housing and cars is very competitive. We've just been so spoiled.
At Feller Chevrolet, they work with people from diverse credit backgrounds to get the right car for their needs. Stop by and see them, Main Street in Alta Vista, and visit fellersdirect.com.
We're here with Colt from We Fix Stupid Computers. Colt, to go along with your residential or individual walk-in services that you offer, you also do a lot of business IT support. How about you discuss that and what specifically do you do to help businesses in the area?
We see a lot of that. Small to medium-sized businesses, they still have their IT projects. They still need resources to help them within their office and for remote users. And so we'll step in and fill in the gap where we do a lot of projects for them, help them manage their resources, their budgets, and get their technology under control.
Colt, how can these people reach out to you to assess their IT needs?
Call us. Our number is 434-525-8590. Our website, wefixstupidcomputers.com. We're on Facebook. And our office is here locally, 14690 Forest Road, right next to Scott's Cabinet on 221.
Hi, this is Zach Mackey, the voice of Virginia Tech men's basketball. You're listening to The Fast Lane with Ed Lane and Trey Lyle. Join the chat at Trey Lyle VT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram.
Is it one step forward and one step back? Liberty Flames fans might be asking themselves that question. We'll get to that in about 15 minutes, latter part of covering the Commonwealth with John Manson. But Jamie Dukes fans might be asking themselves the same thing after what happened on the hardwood last Thursday and Saturday.
It's time for your teams and topics. Covering the Commonwealth, a look at teams and topics from around the Commonwealth. Let's start with the JMU Dukes.
With Shane Metlin covers them for the Harrisonburg Daily News Record. JMU, first two games in Sunbelt play. Look pretty good. Wins at home against Southern Miss and Arkansas State. Then this past weekend, they went on the road to Marshall and Appalachian State and close one against Marshall, and then they were just demolished on Saturday by Appalachian State, 86-66 in a game that honestly never felt all that competitive as App State raced out to almost 50 in the first half. Is it two steps forward and two steps back, or one step forward and one step back for the JMU Duke, Shane?
I think to some degree, although, you kind of think that those first two games and that were a step forward, but they played really well at home, really since the start of the season. I mean, they win their opener against Ohio, and looked pretty good doing it there. But I mean, pretty much anytime they've been in a little bit hostile territory on another team's home court, they have not looked very good, at least for 40 minutes. They've had their moments, but haven't been able to get a win on a road court.
You mentioned the challenges for JMU when they played on road courts and in road environments, particularly, it seems, the defense. Is it a communication issue as simple as that?
I think there's some to that. Preston Spradlin talked about it a little bit today. There's they have had, a really good environment at home. I think they're boosted by that a little bit. The Atlantic Union Bank Center has been a tough place to play. They've won 50 games there since they've opened it 4 years ago. Since they've joined the Sun Belt, they've only lost 5 home games. But I don't know. It's just been a different team when they've gone on the road. And, I don't know how much of that has to do with, complete roster turnover and communication and what you say. But I don't know. It's hard to explain the drastic difference, take into account quality of teams, whether it's a really good team that played on the road or, a team that, you think they should beat.
Shane_DNR Sports and DNR Online for Shane Metlin of the Harrisonburg Daily News Record, who's stepping into the fast lane with us today here on the Virginia Talk Radio Network and the VTRN Sports app. You've been all over this at DNRonline.com and at Shane_DNR Sports, the Virginia House bill that could force more in-state games in the revenue-generating sports. The origins of this and the likelihood of this coming to fruition are what?
I don't know that it's extremely likely to become a law, but I think it's something that, at least some lawmakers want to, be discussed more, something that they want to maybe put a little bit of pressure on the in-state schools to do. And, the thing everybody's going to notice is if, it means, okay, well, now Virginia Tech and UVA have to play JMU or ODU more in football. And they're already playing ODU quite a bit, those two programs. So, it would be a big difference for JMU if they had to play them a little bit more frequently. But, I think you'd also see, it's for revenue revenue sport. So that would include men's basketball at the very least. And I don't know where women's basketball would fall into that, if some programs would be considered revenue generating in the state. But, it would also mean, it's been really hard for JMU to get, VCU for entrance. For instance, on the basketball schedule. But at the same time, it's been really hard for Longwood to get JMU on their basketball schedule. So it might have an effect on a lot of different programs across the state.
I mean, personally and selfishly, it would be awesome to see because we finally get good matchups, but we'll see that in a moment. Shane, we'll wrap it up on this. Women's basketball and men's basketball. The matchups for the Sun Belt MAC Challenge were announced today. Is it reasonable to say that both given the matchup and how well the women's team have played consistently over the course of the season, that may be the most exciting one of the two?
Yeah, it really is. Last year, when JMU and App State were maybe kind of on the fringe of the at-large conversation in the men's, it was kind of, you really wanted to see who they got matched up with there to get another chance at a good non-conference game. But it's the women's side this year because JMU and Ball State are both, maybe going to be in that at-large conversation. If they continue to win like they have, both could be top 50 type teams by the time they play each other. So, yeah, that's the more interesting one this year is on the women's side. And, JMU getting a chance to play a good team at home is a chance for a quality win, if they'd happen to slip up in the conference tournament.
Shane Metlin with us in the fast lane, Shane_DNR Sports and DNRonline.com. Shane, great to chat with you today. Appreciate your time.
All right, thanks.
Now to the Virginia Tech Hokies.
With David Cunningham of TechSideline.com. David, a number of ways we can go with this. We'll say football for last, but women's basketball and men's basketball. First of all, the women. They've got 3 wins in a row. The big one was the Georgia Tech win, but they followed it up with a victory. Came back against Wake Forest yesterday in Castle Coliseum. Are these Lady Hokies starting to find their identity under Megan Duffy?
Yeah, Ed, I think they are. Great to be with you as always. I think the Hokies are starting to find something. Their starters on Thursday against Georgia Tech, each of them scored 17-plus points. That's the first time that's happened in program history. 5 starters, 17-plus points each. They win in double overtime against Georgia Tech. I think more than anything, this group just fights. They fight. They scratch. They claw. They're starting to play better basketball across the board. And I think some people might look at that Sunday result against Wake Forest and go, well, Virginia Tech didn't play well. Yeah, there were some stretches, but you also have to take the opponent into account. That is a Wake Forest team that tries to muck it up, tries to be very, very physical. And I thought for parts of the game, that really got to the Hokies. But the bottom line is they closed the game out. They've won 3 straight games, which is hard to do. Anybody who looked at their ESPN app yesterday or whatever app you get your scores from, if you saw that Pitt SMU women's basketball game, you know that it's hard to close out games in this conference. SMU, was up 32 points at one point, and Pitt came back to win, right? The fact that the Hokies in year 1 under Megan Duffy are playing well enough, they're playing consistent basketball, they are finding ways to win, and it doesn't necessarily mean the exact same thing every single time. On Sunday last week against Miami, Karis Baker hit a bunch of key three-pointers. On Thursday against Georgia Tech, it was by defense down the stretch. Yesterday, Rose Mishaw played the biggest role, and she was named ACC Player of the Week earlier today. She was 9 for 9 yesterday and got some huge buckets when they needed. I think Virginia Tech has shown that it is able to find different ways to win, as Megan Duffy said yesterday, and that's a sign of a team that's on the rise. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to be an NCAA tournament team or that they're a finished product by any means, but I think they're starting to find their rhythm on a more consistent basis, and that bodes well for the future.
It does for the Virginia Tech Lady Hokies. Pivoting to the men's side, Trey and I have both mentioned this. Granted, you blow a 22-point lead in the second half at Cal when you have a lot of turnovers, but Tech rallied and steadied themselves to pull out a victory anyway. It got shaky there at the end, but how much is this Mike Young just squeezing what he can out of clearly a less than desirable roster?
That's absolutely what it is, Ed. And it's funny you mentioned that. Talking to Mike Young this morning on the ACC teleconference, he was asked by David Teal about that exact topic. And he kind of just chuckled and shook his head and said, I'm not really sure how we did it. You know, the Hokies responded well. Cal ties the game, I believe, at 58. And the Hokies respond. Toby Lawal, VCU transfer. It's a huge three-pointer at the top of the key for the Hokies to kind of right the ship a little bit. They go on an 8-9-0 run, kind of pull away for a brief second. Not every single team can do that. You are seeing, as you said, Ed, Mike Young get every ounce out of this group. And you have to give them credit. They have started the last 2 games very, very well. Got up big against Stanford. Got up big against Cal. Can you sustain it, though? That's the big question. Because it doesn't matter if you lose a 22-point lead. I thought Virginia Tech has been pretty good, you know, in the first half of both of those games. But you've got to play 40 minutes of basketball. And I think not that Virginia Tech was really, really bad in both games, but enough to the point where – enough inconsistencies, I should say, to the point where both opponents were able to come back. You've got a big test this week on Wednesday against NC State. You got them at home. You got a pretty good Wake Forest team coming on Saturday. 2 good opportunities at home to kind of get back in the win column again. I don't think this team is as bad as everybody's making it out to be. At the same time, you see the highs and the lows. They do some really, really good things, Ed. And then at the same time, they do some things. They go some long stretches without scoring. It just make you shake your head and go, man, this team is not very good. So I'm curious to kind of see, once the Hokies have an opportunity to get their legs back under them after that West Coast travel, if they can kind of find a little bit of a rhythm.
David Cunningham from SexHighline.com stepping into the fast lane. David, good to be speaking with you. Shifting over to football. The news of Tom Allen leaving Penn State to go to Clemson, as that's all but official according to multiple reports, would mean that a lot of people would presume, and I can understand this, that it will not be Anthony Poindexter, a name we had fun with last week in the fast lane, kind of trolling Virginia fans at least, that their defensive coordinator, that Tech's defensive coordinator might be another Wahoo legend joining Fontel Mines as 2 former Wahoos. But what sense do you get about the direction of this coaching staff when they are bringing in players that you would think fit what the new defensive coordinator wants, but there has not been an announcement just yet?
Yeah, it's very strange, Ed, because it's a tough situation that the Hokies are in, right? They don't have a defensive coordinator yet, but you still have to recruit the transfer portal. You still have to go bring guys in. And to their credit, they've gotten a lot of pretty, I would say, high-quality transfers, especially at defensive back. They brought in, James DeJoncum, a former Virginia guy from Nova. He's going to come in kind of as an edge player, but they've got a lot of Jordan Bass, of course, from linebacker. Can't forget him. But then you look at the defensive back room. They brought in a lot of different guys, and yet we still heard nothing on the defensive coordinator front. I'm not really sure. Last I heard last week, they were still interviewing candidates and had a good sense of where the final few were. I'm not sure if it's progressed since then, but definitely a little strange. It's been nearly over a month. You're creeping up on closer to 2, in the next week or so, on the last time Virginia Tech had a defensive coordinator. Chris Marv was let go. And, the Hokies haven't really had any – you haven't really heard any rumblings yet. It's been very, very quiet on that front, except for the Poindexter rumor. And as far as I've heard, and as my colleague Chris Coleman has pointed out in certain places, we've heard it's not going to be Poindexter. And, of course, if Tom Allen leaves to go to Clemson, well, maybe Poindexter gets more responsibility at Penn State. So I'm not really sure where this is going. It sounded like the Hokies were kind of waiting for some of the playoff games to wrap up because they had some candidates that were playing or coaching, I should say, in those games. But those games are been out of the way for a couple of days, and we haven't heard anything new. It is Monday. Maybe we'll hear something later this week. But as far as I know, it's been kind of quiet on that front, which is, I feel like, a little bit unusual considering the big vacancy the Hokies have.
It definitely is a little bit peculiar, to say the least. What's not peculiar, the insight and analysis from David Cunningham of TechSideline.com. It's just good. David, thank you for your time in the fast lane. It's always good to catch up with you.
Yep, sounds good, Ed.
Now to the Liberty Flames.
John Manson from AsiaVared.com stepping into the fast lane with us here. John, Liberty, they win at Sam Houston State. They lose at Louisiana Tech. Is the biggest takeaway from this weekend, though, kind of twofold? The depth is not great, as we saw when Colin Porter went out and Liberty was kind of stuck with just 5 players on the floor, but they can exhale a smidge because Colin Porter at least got back onto the floor and played some.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll have to wait and see. I mean, Colin did get back into the floor, so it looks like it's not a serious injury, long-term injury, but I'm assuming it's like an ankle sprain, which, after a day or two of not having your adrenaline flowing in the moment, it could swell up. So hopefully Colin will be able to go on Thursday night when the Flames take on UTEP back at Liberty Arena. But yeah, I mean, the depth issue, especially since Isaiah Enan went down and is lost for the season, is Liberty's biggest challenge, biggest hurdle that they have to try to figure out a way to overcome the rest of the way, especially in Conference USA, which is likely going to be a one bid league once again, a very competitive and high level of basketball being played in that conference, but still a one bid league, nonetheless. And when you get into that conference tournament in Huntsville in March, unless you're a top 2 seed, you have to win 3 games in 3 days. If you're a top 2 seed, you still got to win 3 games in 4 days. So that's a lot to ask for a team that the current rotation is only 6 deep, and you certainly don't want to have any additional injuries. So a guy like Colin, you definitely need him back in the lineup when you take on a UTEP team that can go 10 or 11 deep, and they're a team that likes to press you and attack your guards, put pressure on your guards. And last year they led the nation in turnovers forced. So it'd be a big test for the Flames, and they certainly want to have their floor leader out there on that floor.
That would be big for Liberty, Colin Porter, and what he's done. It's not necessarily just the stats itself. It's a lot of the intangibles that are not showing up on the stat sheet that he brings to the Flames. How does that burden shift over to Caden Matheny, who seems like he's at his best when he doesn't have to facilitate the offense but can roam free and look for open three-pointers? Not to mention, if Matheny's on the bench, you can kind of do the same now with Talon Peter, who's really come on strong.
Yeah, since Liberty's gotten into conference play, teams have started playing Caden Matheny a little bit different. I mean, he's getting, the Darius McGee treatment, if you will, where teams are trying to isolate him, take him away from the Flames. I mean, and you understand why they do that. I mean, he's one of the top three-point shooters in the country, shooting it at around 44%. And, he hasn't been able to get that shot off, not been able to get clean looks off the last few games. And he's definitely been playing more off the ball. Even when Colin's been on the bench getting a few minutes of rest here and there, it's been a Zach Cleveland or a Javon Moffman or even an Owen Aquino bringing the ball up the floor and kind of instigating the Liberty offense and letting Caden play off the ball. He's really more suited for that role. And so is Talon Peter. I mean, we saw that with, his 33 points the other night against Louisiana Tech. He's better also playing off the ball. But he was more aggressive, and that's something Liberty's going to need. I mean, their top 6 are no doubt, maybe the best top 6 in the conference, but there's not much behind them that has been able to rise to the top to give them some minutes. So those 6 need to be on. They need to be healthy. They need to take advantage of the rest when they have it. But more importantly, they need to feed off each other and fill their role as called upon.
JC Manson, Twitter, AsiaVared.com for John Manson, who's with us in the fast lane. John, of those players that are not part of the regular 6-player rotation for the Liberty Flames, we've seen some of them, whether it's guys like Bryson Spell, at times it's Caillou, it's Gabriel McKay at a different point, it's Curtis Blair. We've seen a rotation. Do you anticipate 1 or 2 of them maybe getting a significant number of increased minutes, or is it more situationally when Richie McKay and company see a combination of the right matchup and the ability to give somebody a breather?
I think in a perfect world, Coach McKay will be able to find that 1 or 2 guys that he can count on for, 5 to 10 minutes or so each night. But like you mentioned, he's given several of those guys opportunities, and none of them have really kind of stepped into that role. Curtis Blair was a guy that was like the first one up after Enan went down when conference play started. that Western Kentucky game that Liberty lost a 16-point lead in the second half. He, just showed that he wasn't quite ready for conference play, the level of intensity and play that requires. And so we haven't seen him back out there. Brett Decker's another guy that played a lot in the non-conference, but we haven't really seen him play much in conference play. Gabriel McKay is a guy that's played a lot of minutes in the past, and he's been able to play some here the last few games, and is really more of a defensive sub there on the wing for the Flames. But he's been struggling from three all season and has been able to find that consistency there where he was able to knock down shots when he was open last year. That hasn't been the case this season. Xander Yates is another one that, all these guys that we're mentioning, they provide something, but they have weaknesses in their game as well, too. And that's the reason why they're not part of that everyday rotation. So if Liberty can find, one or two of those guys, Gabriel McKay, as Xander Yates seem to be the most likely, even a Kai Yu to play 5 minutes, because you saw when Owen went down with, was riddled with foul trouble Saturday against Daniel Bacho and Louisiana Tech. Two fouls early in the first half, and then quickly got to 4 in the second half. Coach McKay was just looking for anything he could to get some bodies out there to throw at Bacho. But the good news is for Liberty is there's not a Daniel Bacho in every team in Conference USA, but they'll be tested again, with two of the top teams in Conference USA, at least currently in the conference standings, coming into Liberty Arena this week, and UTEP Thursday night, and then New Mexico State Saturday.
John Manson from ASeaofRed.com stepping into the fast lane. John, pivoting away from Liberty basketball to Liberty football. Additions are starting to flow in for the Flames. Not every position has been filled right now, but the biggest ones, it appears, in particular, quarterback. They've now got two options. One, Murdiger from North Carolina, who got kind of nudged out of the way and was in the Fenway Bowl, but that's about it. And then obviously Vasco from Coastal Carolina. What does it say about the approach Liberty is taking, where it doesn't look like there's a clear-cut guy going in and maybe a real chance to get an idea on Jaden Bradford if he's the guy, or obviously if one of the new guys is there, that this looks like it's as wide open as you could see?
Yeah, good setup, and gives me an opportunity to tease. Got an article coming out Friday, a projected depth chart, way too early projected depth chart for Liberty football in 2025. But hey, that's what we do this time of the year. But yeah, I'll kind of give my breakdown on the quarterbacks there as well as the rest of the roster. But it will definitely be interesting. I mean, obviously Kane Salter was the guy in 2024. There was no quarterback competition, but this year, I mean, you got 4 or 5 guys in that room that has something it feels like they could bring. I mean, you mentioned Vasco from Coastal Carolina, also North Carolina transfer Murdiger, and then Bradford as well, who, Jaden Bradford, IMG quarterback, signed with Liberty last year. He was the highest rated recruit to sign with Liberty at a high school ever, and redshirted this past season. He's going to miss spring with a shoulder. Actually, it's an arm injury. He had to get surgery on following the bowl game. And then Ethan Hauk, another true freshman coming in, that'll be an early enrollee and here this spring as well, too. He's actually rated higher than Bradford was. And then you also got Ryan Berger. So, 4 or 5 guys there that'll all be in the mix. I think Vasco's probably the odds-on favorite just because, going into spring practice, just because he's got, more than a year of experience of starting in the FBS, in the Sun Belt at Coastal Carolina under his belt. And he brings that with him. I think Berger will give him a lot of competition as well, too. Or the other guys are all freshmen, either redshirt or true freshmen. And, if they can, impress, maybe, impress the coaching staff, turn some heads there this spring, they could go into the summer in the mix as well, too. But it's definitely going to be an interesting battle and something to watch throughout spring practice, and something that Coach Chadwell and offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach Willie Korn will obviously be paying a lot of special attention to those. And it'll also be interesting in the spring to see how those reps are divided about. Who's getting the bulk of the reps, how many. I mean, you only got so many go around, so will 3 get an equal amount of reps, or will they cut it down to 2? We'll just have to see once spring ball starts, which Liberty gets started in February under Coach Chadwell, so they'll be here before you know it.
Yes, they begin spring ball earlier than a lot of schools do, and that means more coverage of Liberty football to go along with basketball. John, thank you for your time today in the Fast Lane. We always look forward to catching up, and we'll see you on Thursday night staying up late over in L.A.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on, Ed.
And last but not least, or maybe least.
You know what we're doing.
Those haters can't stand us. Left hand up. Who are we? The Commanders.
Lots of left hands are up right now in the Washington, D.C. area.
Notice that song comes out and paused it. Maybe that was actually the thing that changed them.
It might have been, because once that happened, the Josh Harris purchase came quickly. Now everything seems to be going much better for the Commanders. Seawall, you were down there in Tampa Bay. What was it like? What was the stadium environment like when that field goal doinked off the upright from Zane Gonzalez and went in?
I will tell you this. You knew just how many Commanders fans were at that game, because it's hard to see with the Tampa Bay Bucks colors, but with the resounding cheers and, of course, the team just storming the field, you really heard them and knew just how many Commanders fans were in the building when that dunk to the division went in.
It was crazy. The doink went in for the Washington Commanders, and here they are. They're in the NFC divisional round of the playoffs. How much of this is Jaden Daniels willing the Commanders there? How much of this is other guys are actually stepping up around him?
I think it's all of the above, but it starts with Jaden Daniels. Early on in the season, Terry McLaurin shared that Jaden's just his competitive nature and just his faith and just believing that they're going to win the football game. I mean, it transcends. He believes, everybody believes, and then they just go out and get it done. Of course, it gives us all panic attacks, but this is just a competitor that never seems to panic because it's not over until it's over.
Yeah, it really is. And this team has a unique ability. And we were giving kind of an early look at the game against Detroit, which is the second of two games Saturday on the VTR in Sports app and VTR in Sports 93.3 FM, as we're chatting with Candy Waller, Seawall Sports and Entertainment, and Bowie TV Sports here in the Fast Lane on W227BG Timberlake, WVGM AM Lynchburg, WMNA Gretna, Danville, Southside. I see this going one of two ways. Either it's close and I trust Washington and Jaden Daniels, or Detroit is a team that's equipped to exploit a lot of the weaknesses on this Washington roster, and they seem like the one team that has the coaching and disposition to say, we're not going to let this be a close game at all.
Oh, absolutely. I think if teams are really paying close attention to this Commanders team, it's literally don't give them the ball back, right? Because once they get that ball back, or if you're going to overtime and they happen to win the coin toss, they are going to score on offense. So, Detroit has been doing all year what we see some of what the Commanders do in terms of going forward on fourth down, showing the kind of aggressiveness, showing the boldness, if you will. And they just are a daggone good team. So, yes, they have experienced the bye. We know some teams sometimes come out a little shaky after a bye, but this Detroit Lions team from the very start of the season, you could tell was very clear that they wanted another shot at the NFC Championship and then going to the Super Bowl and being potential Super Bowl contenders, which they've proven that they are by having that number one seed for the NFC. So it will be interesting, and it will be interesting to see the competition as well as the masterminds of both of these coaching staffs.
Yes, it will. That will be worth watching, and we will be getting with Candy Waller of Bowie TV Sports as she and her colleagues will have coverage of that. Seawall, thank you for going in depth with us into the Commanders here in the Fast Lane. Travel safely to and from Motown, and we'll see if it's another thrilling Commanders win or if it's a blowout in favor of a Lions team that they hope it's their year.
We absolutely will see that. I'll talk to you guys again soon.
Indeed. Candy Waller, our boots on the ground reporter covering the Commanders and making sure that folks in D.C. get to have their...
Those haters can't stand us. Left hand up. Who are we? The Commanders.
Left hand up.
I think you went late on purpose because we're about to get to LeBron James.
So let's get to him now then. And Gojo and Golic barely in progress.
over the weekend as well, Dad. So fun to get LeBron James in here at the top of the 9 o'clock hour.